Today I'm going to focus on VLANs and the full topology looks like this. This is what I'm going to be building, but for now I want to focus on the smaller bit before we get into advanced stuff. So this is going to be my main fragment of a network I'm going to start building. In this, switch 1 and switch 2 will run VLANs 2 and 3. PC1, PC2 and PC4 will belong to VLAN 2 and they should be able to communicate, and PC3 is going to be placed in VLAN 3 and should be disconnected from PC1, 2 and 4 as it belongs to a different broadcast domain. For this PC to actually be able to talk to those PCs in VLAN 2, we will need a routing. So for now, I'm going to build the VLAN, so I'm going to jump onto switch 1 first. And let's just bring this maybe a little bit, make it smaller so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so, okay, let's jump to configuration, global config mode, interface E1/2, description. We'll put PC1 so we know where we're connecting, documenting the network. Port is up, and as of this moment, let's just display what VLANs we actually have here. Do show VLAN brief. I need this to be bigger. Alright, and maybe just move this down a little bit. Oh, that's better. Okay, so we have VLAN 1, and by default all ports belong to VLAN 1 as shown here. There's some default VLANs 1002, 3, 4, 5 for FDDI token rings, some ancient stuff, and it says unsupported, so we can safely ignore that. The actual values could be between 1 and 4095 in this box. So what I'm going to do is first the descriptions of the ports, interface E, and this is 1/3, description PC2, and I'm going to step down to global configuration mode. So the VLANs are configured in this particular configuration mode. So I will start with the VLAN, and it's asking me for the identifier. So word is basically what is expected, the VLAN ID between 1 and 4094 actually here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a VLAN number 2. Now if I need to create both VLAN 2 and 3, I would be saying 2, 2, 3 like this, or 2, 4 if this is VLAN 2 and 4, or just 1 by 1. If I do that this way, I can name the VLAN, and it could be, I don't know, engineering, for example, something like that. And if at this point, if I do show VLAN brief, it doesn't show in the list. And the reason being, I need to exit out from that VLAN database. And if I repeat my commands, VLAN 2 is now active. I called it engineering, and it's active, and currently there are no ports associated with it. So if I want to associate ports with it now, there's two ways of doing that. I have two PCs, port E1/2 and 1/3. So I can do this individually, interface, let's say E12, and the command is going to be switchport access VLAN 2. Or if I know which ports, and I do, I can use a range command and do this on multiple ports at the same time. Interface range is my keyword, E1/2, and there are consecutive ports. If there are consecutive ports, I can go with the -3. If they were not consecutive ports, let's say 2 and 4 and 7, I would say 4 and 7, something like this. but they are. So I'm going to go 3, and this is going to now enter the configuration of both ports 1/2 and 1/3. And now I can type in my command switchboard mode access. Now this command is going to turn port into a permanent access port. So that means if the device PC1 had a switch, let's say it's a VM or something, can negotiate a trunking dynamically. We'll talk about that later. But this command prevents that from happening. So if they say PC1 was actually VM connected to VMware box, and the VMware box had a switch trying to negotiate trunk between that switch on the VMware box and E12, with this command it will be impossible, because switch 1 will say, no, I am an access port and I can only belong to one VLAN. I cannot be a trunk or multi-VLAN port. So this prevents that from happening. The second command, I'll say switchboard access VLAN 2, the one I just created. Now, since this is complete, let's see the show run interface E12. This is the result. These two commands exist there. Let's check number 3. Same thing, and show VLAN brief. Now it shows me that the port 1213 belong to VLAN 2, which is on the left hand side. Now, so I should also repeat this exercise on switch 2. I have VLAN 2 as well and VLAN 3. So let's just save the changes here. Jump on switch 2. Show VLAN brief. I have only default VLANs. I'll go configure terminal. VLAN 2. We call this engineering. And I don't have to step down. If I do VLAN 3, it's going to automatically deploy the changes for VLAN 2. Name, I'll say accounting. And if I step down, now do show VLAN brief, I should see both VLANs configured, engineering, VLAN 2, and accounting. Name is irrelevant. Name is just for me, for the administrator to know which VLAN belongs to which department in the company, fake company here. But now the second step is the devices use the VLAN ID, the tagging on trunk ports with appropriate VLAN ID, not the name. So now I'm good to go, and now this has to be done separately because port 20 belongs to VLAN 3 and port 21 belongs to VLAN 2. So interface E2/0. First let's go description. PC3. Now switchboard mode access, switchboard access VLAN 3, interface E2/1, 2/1, description is PC4, I'm using upper arrow here, and switchboard mode access, switchboard access VLAN 2. So verification, show VLAN brief. So now I'm sure that appropriate ports, this one belongs to VLAN 3 and this one belongs to VLAN 2, are done. These are now configured. Very useful command to verify this is also show interface status. I can go for like this. This is also going to show me the VLAN association here. Disregard this E303 trunk for the time being. I'm going to fix that later. But the Ethernet 0E20 is now connected to VLAN 3 and 21 is connected to VLAN 2. Another way of doing this is show interface let's say 20 switchboard. This is a very nice command. Shows me so much more about VLAN association and port in general. So it is a name 20 currently enabled. Administrative mode is static access. This is what I mean, that when I do switchboard mode access, it's going to make it permanently an access mode, and it will never be able to become trunk via negotiation of trunking ports. Operational mode is static access, so this is the actual operation. If this port was not administrative mode access, if it could negotiate trunking, it would be able to negotiate because that's what the default operation of the port on a Cisco switch is. Trunking encapsulation is native, we'll talk about that later. Negotiation of trunking is now turned off. So the command that did that is basically show run interface E20 is this command, switch port mode access, make it a permanent access port. Negotiation of trunking is now turned off. Currently it is in a VLAN 3, assigned to VLAN 3, in the name of that VLAN is accounting, and a bunch of other things. Trunking is basically multi-VLAN port, and we will need to complete that now between the switch on port 40, so 40 on both ends. Now, why is that required? The reason it is required because at this point, PC1 and PC2, I already assigned those addresses, should be reachable because they belong to the same switch. So switch knows here, let's go back here, switch 1 show VLAN brief. It knows that port 12 and 13 locally are member of the same broadcast domain. So if I go to PC1, I should be able to ping PC2, provided the addresses I did correctly. 10.1.2.102. Let's do the ping between those PCs. Now, before I do that, actually, show MAC address table interface. We're going to go for E12 interface and E13. Now notice that the MAC addresses are already there, so the PCs must have talked already. And in that output, in the MAC table on the left hand side, we also have numbers signifying which VLAN the port belongs to as well, so which is helpful. So let's go back now to PC1 and ping that guy. Now ARP request, so PC1 had to learn the MAC address of PC2, and voila, it now works. So obviously the other way around it works. But if I try to ping PC4 12104, I am not going to get the reply. And the reason being is that this port, currently port 40, belongs to VLAN 1. It is not configured as a trunk or multi-VLAN or port that tags the frames when they are sent out and untag when they are received and placed in appropriate VLAN destination PC. So what can we do to make that happen? So on the switch 2 N1 port 4 show run interface E40 is currently in auto mode, but let's see what's on the switch 2 show run interface E40. Okay, so I should have a description by the way on this one as well. That will be handy dandy. So conft interface E40, I'm gonna place that description. It's switch 2 description. I made a typo, showed me that it didn't recognize a letter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert that port. In fact, do show CDP neighbor include SW. Show me the switch connections. It is connections. Switch 2 is connected to port 4 on my end, switch 1, and switch 2 also has port 40. So we'll need to make it a trunk. So there are two trunking modes of operation in Cisco switch. There's an older protocol proprietary ISL, which I'm going to ignore. We don't want to use this one. We want to use tagging .1q. .1q protocol is basically the one that allows tagging those VLANs on the port that is sending traffic, so that the receiving end knows which VLAN it is coming from. So the first command is going to be switch port. I want to say trunk encapsulation is going to be .1q, and I should do this on both ends. So I'm gonna jump over here, interface E40, switch port trunk encapsulation .1Q. So that's my first command. And then I'm gonna turn on unconditional trunking port, switch port mode trunk. And the same on the other end, switch port mode trunk. And by default, so do show interface trunk, by default this port 4, ignore port 3 for the time being. Let's just jump here, it should be fine. Do show interface trunk. It's only port 4 on this one. The port is now currently running in .1Q protocol 802.1Q. It is in a trunking status. The native VLAN on the port is basically one of the VLANs, and by default this is VLAN 1, is called native. What that means is that when traffic is sent from the VLAN 1 across that port, it won't carry a tag. So if it arrives on a trunking port on the other end, on the other switch, and has no tag, carries no tag, the switch 2 assumes it's coming from VLAN from VLAN native, and that native VLAN is locally the same VLAN 1. So if it's the same, oh, it must be coming from VLAN 1. Obviously, the problem would be if I change the VLAN on the left-hand side on switch 1 from VLAN 1 to, let's say, 90. And it would be sending from the 90 VLAN if I had a PC here, untagged. So the other one, if I didn't change that configuration for native VLAN to 90, would assume that it's coming from VLAN 1, and now be a big bit of confusion, and the traffic would be delivered between VLANs, which we don't want to. So if I change the native VLAN, I should change it on all switches and use exactly the same number. So since now it is in a trunking mode, if I do show VLAN brief, one thing to notice that E40 disappears from this output show VLAN brief. It's because these ports are only showing the VLAN IDs, access ports, whereas this now E40 is in a trunking mode. So show VLAN brief is not going to show me that, but show interface trunking is. So now if that is working, show interface trunk, the port is now carrying VLANs between 1 and 4094. So that now it should work. If I ping now from the PC1 to PC4, I should get the reply this time around. And voila, it works. One thing to notice is that from security perspective, in production system, we don't want to allow all VLANs to cross, because somebody can connect something, configure or misconfigure something. So what is a good practice is to go to this port E40 and switch port trunk allow VLAN commands, and we will only allow VLAN 2 on this end. We can do VLAN 3 on the other end. I want to do 2 and 3. In fact, I want to create a VLAN 3 as well. The reason being because at some point both router 3 and router 4 will belong to both VLANs and can be used both as gateways. So what I'm going to do on switch 1, I will add, even though now it's not needed at this point in configuration, I will add VLAN 3 name accounting, and on port E40 switch port trunk allow VLAN, and I'm going to specify which VLANs. I can do all, which is a default, except for VLANs, none, no VLANs at all. I can remove particular VLAN if it's already configured, or add VLAN if VLANs are configured. Since I didn't specify the list of VLANs allowed, I can say 2 and 3 like this. Do show run interface E40, verify in the config it's there. If I wanted to add, let's say VLAN 5, if there was, I could say add 5, and it would add VLAN 5. Or if I had a VLAN 7 as well and I want to remove it, I would say remove 7. Now obviously it shows do show interface trunk as only VLANs allowed 2, 3. So I need to repeat the same process on switch 2 and call it a day. Interface E40 switch port trunk allowed VLAN 2 and 3. Do show interface trunk. Only VLAN 2 and 3 are now allowed on this port. Step down, save configuration, And in the next video, I'm going to enable the first router so that PC3 can talk to PC1 and 2 and 4 via routing from a different VLAN than those guys belong to.